Today we're going to take a look at some of the parts that I saved off of Old Clanky. This was my 2002 Toyota Camry LE with the 2AZ FE 4-cylinder blow yourself up engine. Nobody knew they'd blow up at the time, but they all do. Don't ever get a Toyota with the 2AZ FE engine. Lesson learned the hard way. That car was the first year that they used that engine, maybe entirely, or they may have started in late 2001 using it, but you don't want that engine. So what do we have here? Well, obviously I saved the badges. All of this was on the back of the car. Toyota was on the left, Camry and LE was on the right, and the Toyota symbol was right above the trunk key. These come off with nothing more than a flat blade screwdriver if you don't care about damaging the finish on the car. They're just real heavy duty double stick tape. That's really all it is. They might be metal, they might be plastic, I can't tell. They're very flimsy, and if you bend this here, it will bend and will snap on you. So you do want to be careful in taking that off. Some of these did get a little tiny bit bent, but other ones are okay. Occasionally some of these will have a little metal tang sticking out to perfectly center it, and there would be holes in the body for it, but we don't need any of these parts now because obviously they don't do anything except look pretty. So I have a bunch of parts here. The first thing I'll just show you quick was the clock and temperature display. I don't have a pinout for this, so I'm not going to play with this now. Maybe in the future I'll figure out how to power this up and get the time display, maybe the dimming for when you put the lights on. The temperature display will never work because I don't have a sensor or know what it would use, but I'm keeping the clock just because it was the clock. It'll do your hours and minutes, 12-hour time, and English and metric for the temperature, which, again, isn't going to matter. So we'll set that aside. So what do we have left? What we have left is the alarm siren. Little tiny dinky thing. I had this installed as part of a keyless entry and remote start system. I don't remember exactly what I paid for that. It wasn't cheap. It wasn't insanely priced. I think it was a fair price, essentially. So it just is. This was mounted under the hood, so it's dirty. I saved the horns because that is the voice of the car. So these are them here. There's a low and a high tone. I don't know which one is which. We're going to find out. I'll fire them off. Over here is the trunk release solenoid. Now, I don't remember precisely if this is the same one that I had in my old Chevy or if this is another one. I do not remember. I really don't remember. So I can't tell you for sure. The wires on here are factory. They came with the little boot on the terminals to help it prevent doing that. And I don't even remember how this mounted up in the car exactly. It doesn't make a difference at this point. What I did was I put the ground underneath this because it was bolted right to the car, which would then therefore have ground, and that was it. And it has this little keeper on it that you would somehow get the trunk cable and this cable in here. If you look closely, there's a little slot in that screw. So you take off the nut on there and you'd put both cables in there and then tighten it down, and it would like clamp the cables together, so when the solenoid would pop, then it would tug on that cable and open the trunk. So that was the electric trunk solenoid. Did not come with the car. I bought that separately from a company called Parts Express. Another thing was I found that on the 2002 Camry, they had deleted the "you have a bulb out in the back of the car" feature that was available on the 2001 and prior Camrys probably all the way back to 1987. My dad's 87 Camry has that feature, and the Whiff's 2000 Camry also has that feature. Well, I didn't feel like getting pulled over by a cop in the event I had a brake light burned out. So what did I do? I went to the auto parts store. Now, I bought this car, I think, in the tail end of 2003. LEDs were not around much then, but they did have LED brake lights. And you can see the terminals on there. You basically have a low and a high. There are 2 terminals there and 2 terminals there. I don't remember exactly how it works. It looks like there are holes for ventilation in there, but it's otherwise one solid plastic piece. You can see there's a resistor, a couple of resistors in there, and maybe a diode or 2, unless that's a connection block. And the LEDs, there are 12 of them there. So we'll see if we can get these to fire up. And I may be mistaken, but it is possible that one or more of the LEDs may have burned out over the years. So we're going to test that also. So let me get a battery, and I guess we'll do the trunk solenoid first, and maybe the lights, and then we'll play with the noisemakers, and we'll go from there. So I'll get a battery and be right back. Okay, we just have to strip back this wire a little bit. So we'll just take a little bit off of there. That's good. Twist that together just because. And positive is over here. Negative is here. We'll clip that onto the terminal like that. I'll pull this out because it pulls in, if I'm not mistaken. And I will turn power on. And it may jump, I don't know. So we're going to go ahead and try it. Now, obviously, it doesn't do anything more after that because the trunk release cable was spring-loaded or something, and it would snap back. That's a solid release. Also seems to draw a bit of current with the sparks. That's a decent amount of current it pulls. So, I guess that's that. And now we'll move on to the brake lights. Okay, so here's the brake light. I can't determine which is low and which is high. So, like your parking brakes, one more time, your parking lights and your actual brakes. So, I don't know. But here's one, and it lights up. I don't know if the camera will make it out, but there definitely is a burned out LED. Here's the other side. I think it's a little dimmer, but I can't quite tell. And there is a little bit of a delay when these shut off. They're still very quick, but I can see them fade out. Let me get the connection on there, and I'll see if I could show you up close. I'm going to move that. So you can see the burned out LED on there. And that's that. So now we'll get the other bulb and try that. I think if I just do that, we should be safe. Yep. This one you can definitely tell. So let's see. This one, all of them work. And that's on low. And now here is high. So you can definitely see the difference. It makes the camera auto adjust like that, but definitely there. So in 17 years, only one of the 24 LEDs in total in these bulbs failed. That's pretty damn impressive. And honestly, to see the difference in light output for one of them being out, I don't think you're really going to be able to see that much of a difference. If you had 5 of them out, yeah, there would definitely be a difference. But one, you're never going to be able to tell the difference. Now, an interesting little story while we're on the brake lights. One light that I neglected to get because I figured it wouldn't be that much of a problem ended up, of course, biting me in the ass. Live and learn. Was the high mount brake light. Maybe they didn't have bulbs for that at that time in that size. Maybe I didn't look hard enough. Maybe I didn't think of it. But many years later, I had brought my car in to be inspected because in New York we have yearly inspections and they check over goddamn everything to see if they can ring up a nice big fat repair bill for you to get your car to pass as per New York State and blah blah blah. And I did not know, but the high mount brake light on that car burned out and they charged me $10 to change a fucking light bulb. Now, is it a $10 job? It's a $5 job, that's for sure. Maybe not including the price of the bulb. How much is a bulb? $1 or something, or at least back in them days it was. It wasn't that big of a deal, but I thought 10 was a little expensive. $7.50 or $7 I would have been okay with. 10 was a little excessive. You had to go in the car in the back seat and kind of kneel on it facing backwards and pull the assembly toward you and then lift it up. And then you would twist out the fixture that held the bulb, pull out the bulb, put in the new one, snap it back in, put it down in place and lock it in. And that was it. Now, if you're an old lady, $10 is a bargain because that's not something an old lady is going to do. But I wish he would have told me, hey, you got a burned out bulb. Okay, I'll buy the bulb. I'll change it for you here so I don't have to pay labor on it. And he still would have jacked up the damn price of the bulb. Anyway, that was the story with that. It just is. I don't know what else to tell you on that. So I guess next we're going to play with the alarm siren. This is one of those sirens that has, I don't know, 6 different sounds or something like that. Not really sure on that. So let's see if my stripper will strip the wires, strip the insulation away enough. Might have to get, I don't know. Well, it sort of is over here. Oh, there we go. Let's see if I could split that. Yeah. Okay. All right. So now we'll just strip these out real quick. And then we can hook that up. Now, I am going to be running this indoors. And I don't want to lose my damn hearing, or what's left of it. So I have some, these are like shooting range headphones that block out the sound. And I'm going to put these on. China had sent these to me. And they actually do work pretty nicely. So I can't complain about that. So let me just get that on. I guess that'll be good. I can't really hear myself, so I'm going to be talking louder. Okay, now I can hear myself because it repeats that through. So we're just going to go ahead and hook this up. If I can get a good connection. Good. And this, and then I'll apply power. I think just for everybody's volume, I'm going to turn this, face it down. I'll lift it up at one point or another. So here is your chance to turn down your volume, because there's no way I'm going to edit this out for you to get the full effect of this. So here we go. I'm sure that many of you remember those sounds from car alarms back in the day. Very, very common alarm back in '03 or '04 maybe, when I got this actually installed. I'll turn it on again, and I'm going to lift it up. Now, I think if you blip the power on it, I'm not sure. Let me go to like 2-3 sounds in, and I'll blip the power and see what happens. No, this one just restarts. I don't see any way to adjust that at all. The Whiff many years ago had an 86 Olds Cutlass car with a 6-cylinder engine that was actually carbureted with an Edelbrock carburetor. That thing was a total piece of crap. Freaking nothing worked. Even the passenger seatbelt didn't work on that thing, so I had to just, get in that thing and drive around and hope nobody ever hit us, and so I wouldn't go through the windshield. It had some balls. It actually did move. That had an alarm system built into it, but the fuse for it was pulled, and I didn't know why. And I hooked it up, and then later I found out why, which was that it would just randomly go off out of nowhere. However, the alarm siren had a rubber panel that you could remove, and it had 6 or 7 dip switches, and you could turn off any of those sounds that you wanted. So that sound, you could have it do that, like if you had the key fob, and it can go if you wanted, just because. But anyway, that was the alarm siren, just a little tiny thing, and I don't know, it's a siren. Nothing really special, but I couldn't get rid of that. I have the rest of the alarm system, and I don't know if I'm going to show you a video of many of the other parts from that car, but I'll tell you something. The amount of wiring involved. Now, I put keyless entry systems into my old Chevy and the wife's old Chevy Cavalier, 90 Chevy Cavalier, and that was child's play compared to the amount of wires and bullshit that this alarm had. Anyway, let's move on to the horn. And we got a couple things to do. First, I have to see if I can get on the terminal. Well, that wasn't difficult at all. And hopefully we can find a good place where there's metal that's not too rusty. So we'll turn on power. Nothing. Oh, there we go. I feel a lot of air from it. Wow. So I think that's the high tone. I'm not certain on that. Now, I don't know the name of this type of horn that actually has this covering with an outlet for the sound. It changes the sound. A channel I watch called Technology Connections, I think his videos are a bit overproduced, but he had a thing on car horns and showed the ones that don't have the shroud on them. And you can hear the difference of that. So anyway, let's try this one. This might be a lower tone. Yep. So that's the low tone. And now I'm going to get some more wires and we'll hook both of them up. Okay, I got it all hooked up. And here we go. This is what Old Clanky used to sound like. That's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. So yeah, they still work, obviously. Let me take my headphones off. That's a lot better. Yeah, so that was the stuff from Old Clanky. Yeah, pretty cool. I'm glad I saved the horns. I think Ginger sounds exactly the same. I can't see them changing the horn from one model year to another. But you got to hear both the high and the low tone by themselves, and then with that. In fact, let me do one more. Let me hook the headphones back up, and I'll just energize one and touch the positive terminal on the other. So I'll pull that. I'll clip here. Right. Okay. So that's the difference between that and why you have two horns. Again, I don't know if I'm going to have another video on some of the other parts I took out of the car. There's nothing really more to quote-unquote power up, per se. One other little interesting little tidbit that I'll just mention, because we're talking about the car, is I did pull the instrument cluster. Now, you may remember that I had a video many years ago on how to reset a failing instrument cluster on a 2002 Camry, and that's because the damn thing fucking died on me. Toyota just missed the boat on quality on that car. There were a lot of issues that they missed. It wasn't the Toyota of years ago. It really wasn't. There were a lot of quality control issues that I really was not happy with. And to have an instrument cluster fail, it's not unheard of, but on a Toyota, it's pretty damn rare. And with the amount of comments that I got on that video of, oh my God, mine just died, you saved me, and things like that, apparently it was a fairly common problem. So the symptom was that everything would be fine with the car, and you'd turn it off, you'd go into work, you'd run into the grocery store, you'd do whatever you had to do. And when you shut the car off, it would leave the fuel gauge reading what it's, what the current level is, and it would leave the odometer display lit up. It was just an LCD screen. There was only backlit when you had the lights on, the parking lights on the car. After 10 minutes, the display and the fuel gauge would go to empty and disappear, and that was that. And then when you turn the car back on, it would all come right back up. Well, the problem was, it would all work great, and you'd shut the car, and after 10 minutes it would blank that, and when you turn it back on, you only got some of the indicator lights on the dash, and you got no tachometer, no temperature, no fuel, no speed, no odometer, no nothing. So just a few warning lights, including, of course, because they had to do this, the check engine light. Couldn't have that off also, just so it wouldn't pester me, but anyway, it just was. So anyway, I had to get a replacement. Went on eBay, and I bought one, and it was $20, $30, I don't remember, and plugged that in, and it just didn't work. It was bad all around. The original cluster, if I would take it out of the car, which was only 2 screws, then I could flip it up and unplug the 2 connectors on there. And if you did that with the key on, you would put the connector in at a weird, like walking it in, kind of like wiggling it till it seated in there. And it wouldn't always work. So sometimes you had to do it a couple times. And eventually you'd hear the dinger for the seatbelt saying, hey, your seatbelt's not buckled. And that was how you knew, because you couldn't see the front of it, that it was working. And that would make the entire instrument cluster work perfectly again until the car was shut off and 10 minutes had elapsed and the fuel gauge would go down and the odometer would blank out, and that was it. The second cluster, like I said, that thing just didn't work. I don't know what the deal was. The gauges were reading crazy and it just didn't work. So I guess that was a dud and I got screwed on that. And then I gave the car to my dad, and he said, well, I ain't going to drive with a dead cluster, so you're going to have to put one in. I said, listen, it's your problem. You want the car, you're going to have to pay for that. So he finally agreed, and we found a junkyard that had one that was $40, and it was so close to the original mileage, it was like 4,000 or 5,000 over what the car actually had. So it was pretty damn close. Anyways, took that out. I went back to, I bought the cluster and I went back to the car, and I was parked somewhere in another county. It wasn't that far. Somewhere in the next county. I was parked on this road in like an industrial park area. So there's all kinds of sand and crap on the side of the road and overgrown weeds and crap and things and whatever. And I went back to the car because I had the original one loose, and I plugged this thing in, and I did it with the power, with the key off, just to mitigate any possible circumstances. Because the one I had was failing clearly, and there was no fixing it. It's just an integrated circuit, so there's nothing I'm going to be able to do to fix it. Well, anyway, I plugged that thing in, I flipped it around, and the gauges were fucking all over the place. This one's reading here, this one's reading here, that one is here, and this just all over the... Okay. I said, oh, fuck, this is not good. So I turned the key on, and now it's reading like 8,000 RPM and at like 120 miles an hour, and the gauges are still crazy, and they just moved, but that was it. And I shut the key, and they went back down some to like where they were, and I'm like, great, I just wasted $40, and this junkyard is not going to take it back, and you know, that's that. Because electronic parts they won't take back. Not that there's anything I could do wrong, but they won't take it back. And then magically, a second later, everything went down to zero. And I turn the key on, there's the dinger, there's the fuel gauge, the temperature gauge. I start it up, RPM goes up to where it should be, and I start driving, and the speed registers properly, and everything was great, and that was it. Only problem with that cluster was the little plastic around the clear like window thing that you could see had a mark, almost like a cigarette burn looking mark. Maybe that's what it was, I have no idea, but it didn't make a difference. Didn't matter what it looked like, it just had to work, and that was that. So now I have Ginger, which is a 2003. It's the identical car, but it has the 6-cylinder engine. So this cluster that I pulled out of Old Clanky was that one from the junkyard that I know worked. So I said, you know what, I shouldn't damage the car by plugging this in. Shouldn't is the operative word. I plugged that one in, and it actually read 0, and everything was all good. And then I turned the key on, and the fuel gauge registered. It read the mileage on Old Clanky, which was 152,000 miles, probably more like 146, because that had a little bit higher mileage. So anyway, whatever the deal was, it actually read. And I said, oh, wow, no kidding. Now, I hadn't started the engine, so the temperature's all the way down. But I said, you know what, let me start it up. I'll sit here and let it idle for a couple of minutes and maybe take it for a spin around the block. So I started up, and the RPM goes up, but it didn't read properly. It was like about 1,000 RPM higher than it should have been. So clearly there was a difference between the clusters for the 4 and the 6-cylinder engines. Another difference was Old Clanky had PRND2L, where Ginger has PRND32L. So when I would move the shifter, everything would work and it would go PRND. And then when I put it in 3, there was no light there, which never would have happened unless a bulb burned out. So that was kind of interesting. But 2 and L lit up properly when it was in the appropriate gear. So I took it around the block. I couldn't quite fathom if the speed was right. I thought it was maybe a bit low. There are, I think, a little bit bigger tires on that car, so possibly that might have been the reason, because a smaller tire is going to read a higher speed rating, and a bigger tire is going to read a lower one, because you get less revolutions out of that. So, you know, maybe that was the deal. I don't know for sure, and there was no real way to compare it, per se. So I left it at that. The temperature gauge did creep up. And I said, okay, well, it works, and I can sell this with whatever the mileage is, which I wrote down on the back of it, so there's no mistaking. I screwed myself in the process because going around the block, believe it or not, was a mile, or at least the point, you know, maybe it read 0.7 miles, and because it doesn't display the decimal on the thing. And it just rolled over to the next mile, so there's an extra mile on Ginger that is not accounted for. So if I ever sell it, it's got 1 more mile on it than it says. Right, big deal. So anyway, I said, okay, let me take that cluster out, and I'm going to go ahead and put the original one back in, because there's obviously a difference between the 4 and the 6-cylinder clusters. So I hooked the original cluster back in, and I flipped it over, and it's reading like 6,000 RPM and 100 miles an hour, and the gauges were all fakakta in all different directions and shit. And I said, completely forgetting about getting the cluster, because it was such a clusterfuck going through all that shit. My dad paid for the fucking cluster. Why can't he just go and get fucking one, you know? I drove that car for 6 months with no instrument cluster, and once a week I would actually disconnect it and plug it back in just to check how much gas I had, because at the time I was working at Tiny Middle, and typically after 2 weeks or 10 trips to and from work, I would need to fill up. But there might be a trip to the grocery store or another place or something like that, or maybe a stop on the way home that was a little bit out of the way. So I wanted to just make sure, and I never did run out of gas. And for my dad, that's like luxury that even it sort of works with the kind of cars that he used to drive. So I don't know, but he insisted upon that because my mother, not that she looks at a dashboard or even what color the fucking traffic light is, another story entirely on that, which I've already told in one of the old war stories. But I'm sorry this is long-winded. But anyway, I plugged in Ginger's original cluster, and the gauges were all fakaked all over the place. So I said, oh shit, I broke the car. Totally forgot about what happened, but oh shit, I broke the car. And I turned the key on, and it went to 8,000 RPM and 120 miles an hour, and I said, shit, fuck. What do I do now? I shut the key off, and I'm thinking, well, I guess I could put Ginger's cluster in here and write down the mileage, and the RPM will be wrong, and then, boom, gauges read 0, start the engine up, gas comes up, odometer reads what Ginger is supposed to read, temperature gauge registered, RPM is reading correctly, and I take it around the block once again, everything is perfectly fine, and that was the story with that. Clusterfucked at every turn. And in fact, I had another video I recorded the same day where I showed how to reset that. And I entitled the video Clusterfucked, but I starred out the UC in Clusterfucked, and that worked for years. And then Susan took the helm and said, demonetized. It was just a rant video anyway, but, you know, just for fun. Yeah, that one was demonetized, so I'll put a link in the description to, I guess, both of those, because I mentioned it. And on that note, you know, if you want to watch the clusterfuck video, hey, it's on the house, people. Great. Anyway, that's going to do it. So thank you so much for watching. Make sure you click like, make sure you click subscribe, and take care. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.